Well, that wasn't ideal, was it? Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal, it's the Raw Reaction show this morning. And I am feeling pretty raw about yesterday. I'll be very honest with you. It's a disappointing morning to be waking up today and talking about the result, which did not go the way that we were hoping, the way we expected, and leaves Arsenal, of course, with a big uphill battle when it comes to the second leg. It has to be said. Sorry, Arsenal are still very much in this tie. We've seen 1-goal deficits, changed many times before, and certainly Arsenal showed in the game throughout, as we will talk about. They're very capable of creating some goal scoring opportunities, but in the end, it was still a very disappointing display overall, particularly some individual performances that we'll talk about a little bit later on in today's show. And we'll be going through plenty of your thoughts and feelings, of course, about it. Apologies, obviously, for the late start this morning. I was taking a delivery of my new car. So I was like, it was arriving between 7 and 8. And I was thinking, it's probably best if I just change over the show for a little bit later on in the morning. But very happy that that's here, but ultimately not happy. It doesn't in any way help the mood today whatsoever. No, it's not a Tesla. Come on, be real. But thank you so much to all of you for tuning in, especially after a result that we saw last night. I know it's not particularly great. And as always, after these types of results, I do recommend that if you need to take a break from things, please do. Don't wallow. There is more to life than football, as always. So please do bear that in mind. But let's jump to the chat box. Good morning to you all. Amberly, Spearmint, Kirill, Stephen, Jeffrey, Amberly, Nick, Gaza and Paul. We've got Ballot Gooner and Kazang. We've got LSJV. We've got Tristan. We've got Angela and Luke and Jeffrey. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all for being here. And we'll be going through, of course, all of the game and some of the instances. And, of course, going into part 2, we'll be tackling some of your comments, your questions, your theories and more, of course, right after this first section of the show. So let's not waste any further time. If you could drop a like, if you could subscribe, really would appreciate all of that, of course, as well. But 1-0, it is half-time in the tie. There is still 90 more minutes still to be played. Of course, Arsenal would have loved to have taken a lead into their game against PSG in Paris. They would have loved, I reckon, to take a draw into their game against PSG away from home. But if there's one thing that we can take inspiration from, of course, the women's team losing to a French side at the Emirates before going and absolutely walloping them in Lyon. And that should certainly be inspiration for Arsenal. And that result should certainly be inspiration for Arsenal as well. But half-time in the tie, Arsenal 0, PSG 1. So how did it go down? Well, the lineup was, I think, what we expected. I don't think there can be any complaints really at all, about the lineup. This was, of the available players, our strongest team. And this is the team, of course, that I was expecting to see. And it was a team that created opportunities. Now, interestingly enough, Mikel Arteta spoke about a situation that changed in kind of the first 20 minutes and that he wasn't happy with how things were going in the first 15, 20 minutes that led to quite a lot of PSG dominance. And that had to be changed later on. He didn't want to provide specifics in the post-match press conference, but he did reference it. I always find it odd if you're not going to talk about it, probably best not to mention it whatsoever. It's not like it was brought up by the media in the post-match presser, but he did bring it up himself that they had an issue that had to be changed in the first 15 to 20 minutes. I imagine that was to do with the midfield. Certainly from kind of a brief little analysis of what I saw, there was far too much space in the middle of the park as Arsenal pressed quite high. The gap between Rice, Merino and Odegaard, particularly Rice and the other two midfielders, was so big at times as the high press tried to prevent PSG from progressing, but in the end it opened up transitions. Miles Lewis-Skelly's positioning as well was slightly off in the first 15 minutes as well, and that did give loads of chances, especially, of course, the first goal, which leaves them ahead. We'll come to that. I do want to talk about the pre-match stuff just before we go into the game more specifically, because the noise, the atmosphere inside the stadium, the noise that the fans generated was brilliant. the noise itself, the support, the fans really brought it last night. They really did. And it was great. And PSG have an amazing support. And we knew that from the game we played against them earlier in the season, of course, where they didn't stop singing all game. I'm going to be very blunt about this. This was bad. The Tifo that you can see on the screen was dreadful. Now, of course, it was put together. There was suggestions and proposals made by fan groups, as we are very well aware of, multiple fan groups. But because of time constraints, their designs could not be incorporated quickly enough. Whether or not they could have been implemented quickly enough, sadly, it seems the actual kind of process by which the Tifo is held aloft was just not very effective at all. You'd hope that they might have. I think they did practice this the day before. Even then, the images that I saw that got leaked of like the cannon in itself, it's just not the best. It's quite dull. It's not intimidating in any way. It's not inspiring in any way. It's just the cannon. Like when I was told it was a cannon design, I thought they might change it to be a little bit more kind of inspiring. But it wasn't. I also was surprised that it wasn't the cannon and the red and white around the stadium as well. I don't really know why we didn't do that like we did in the Real Madrid game, because that's far more effective than a big flag being held aloft. So I appreciate that there's the effort that goes into it. But the execution was really off. If anything, it kind of set the tone. A lot of hype, a lot of build-up, but executing the plan didn't happen. And it was something of a metaphor, if you like, for the evening. I just didn't particularly rate it, especially when you consider the make it happen Tifo, which happened on the East Stand, was very good. That was very good. But this, of course, wasn't. And if anything, it turned us into a little bit of a meme with how poor it was. Thankfully, the atmosphere in the stadium was electric, and obviously that noise carried over the first 3 minutes. But Arsenal go behind very, 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 very quickly. And it is the worst possible start. When you've built up all of this excitement, all of this energy, all of the anticipation, to have a horrendous defensive moment as we did, which allowed them. Declan Rice has to be looked at a little bit here. Declan Rice abandons Dembele to close down Kvaratskhelia and double up with Timber instead of leaving Timber and perhaps more so another player to cover in. But Rice abandons Dembele on the edge of the box, meaning Kvaratskhelia can literally just pass the ball round Rice straight to him. It's a really good finish, don't get me wrong. It's an excellent finish, and Dembele's had an excellent season. Kvaratskhelia was a nightmare all day. Timber had a really difficult start to the game and grew into it. And by the end of the game, I really thought he had a quite impressive, particularly second half performance defensively and offensively in how he dealt with the pressure and the double ups and all of this type. But we knew it was going to be very difficult. But it was disappointing that in the opening part of the game, we were so open. And we were so incredibly vulnerable. And Arteta talks about what changed. For me, I think it's the gap between Rice and the two midfielders in front of him. I think it's Lewis Skelly's slight tactical positioning also. Of course, Rice and his role, it plays a part in this first goal as well. And when we did change things, of course, that enabled us to get more on the ball. It enabled us to be more dominant, to make chances, to get opportunities, of course. Yes, later on in the game, it kind of opened up again for PSG, but mainly we had opportunities to do stuff. Before we get to those chances, though, we have to talk about the officials. Now, it's been a breath of fresh air escaping from Premier League referees. A real escape that has been a delight at times. The refereeing we had in the 2 games against Real Madrid was really good. You know, it was really, really, even though it didn't allow the game to flow in Madrid, here, some of the things that we saw from this referee were ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This decision on Saka has to be one of the worst calls I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of bad calls this season, as an Arsenal fan in particular. But Bukayo Saka or Nuno Mendes, there's a little bit of physical kind of like as they're running for the ball, but Nuno Mendes loses his footing. He wins the ball and is in a one-on-one situation, or at least a situation where he can play in a teammate as well to score. This is just a joke. This is a real kick in the teeth at this moment here. And I asked Arteta afterwards, and he said that he basically just turned around and said that he has nothing to say on this. I think that kind of said it all. There was another moment, of course, as well. Towards the end of the game, Hakimi on a yellow card prevents Martinelli from getting into the box. If he's not on the yellow, he probably does get a yellow for that. So you can have a debate about that. But it was a terrible refereeing display all game, and it incensed the crowd, and you could sense the frustrations in the Emirates, and that kind of grew, if you like, throughout as the frustration grew and grew and grew. But we had two really good chances. The first one, of course, across from the left-hand side that Martinelli's stretching for at the back post, just can't quite time the run to get the connection right on the ball. And that, of course, was Arsenal's biggest early chance in the game. But the chance that he does get, where Miles Lewis-Skelly does brilliantly to hold off the kind of all of the midfielders that were really chasing him, and then play the perfect pass through to Martinelli. I've watched back this chance time and time and time again, and I can't help but think that he absolutely has to score this. Because when you watch the replay back of the shot, the ball it doesn't curl too much. He doesn't get much whip on the ball whatsoever, and it makes it quite an easy save in the end for Donnarumma. He absolutely has to score this. I mean, you could argue MJ says he could go near post with this, but this chance has to be scored. This chance absolutely must be scored. So that was very, very frustrating as well. Obviously, that chance wasn't taken. It wasn't like we didn't create anything in this game. We really did. Again, chance creation. I've talked about this time and time again. Chance creation has been second to chance finishing for us this season. It's been the finishing of chances that will be Arsenal's downfall if there is one this season. And that is really, really gutting in that moment. And then we start the second half. And of course, we think we start it in the perfect way because Mikel Merino leaps to reach Declan Rice's perfect cross to head past Gianluigi Donnarumma. But he's offside. And you can't, I haven't got any complaints, but the only complaint I have got is that they all need to be better at getting onside. They all need to be better at getting into the correct position here. It's just, there's been times this season where, Martinelli against Fulham, the Merino one off Havertz, if you like it. What game was that? Was that Aston Villa, I think? Havertz offside against Chelsea. These fine margins and moments, of course, have really defined Arsenal's season. There's not a controversy about this. It's not like we're hard done by in these moments, but it is frustrating, of course, that these very slim margins have affected us so greatly this season, and how different things would be if just the coin would land on the opposite side for us. Luck has not been with Arsenal this year at all. We've missed so much this campaign through things out and beyond our control. But an offside is something you have to look at and say, you need to be better at getting onside. Again, really good from Mikel Merino. And what frustrated me most about this was that I think Merino had to be up top earlier. Trossard has the chance, of course, to score, and is obviously a really good save as well from Donnarumma. We all know that it was a brilliant, brilliant save, and you can say that Trossard should score, and he probably should. But he goes for the far post. Maybe you could go high for the near post, but chooses to go across the keeper. He is stretching, of course, to take the strike, and it's still a good shot because it does force Donnarumma into a really challenging stop that is very impressive. But I felt as though that Merino had to get up top earlier. I felt that we could have made changes to the team in order to make that happen. And we could have changed some things. Lewis-Skelly could have moved into midfield. We could have brought Kieran Tierney or Zinchenko on to play that left-back role and pushed Rice a little bit further up. and then move Merino into the centre forward position. We could have done something like that. We could have dropped Trossard into Odegaard's role and taken Odegaard off instead, who we'll talk about, of course, shortly as well, to keep Trossard on the field, who was more impactful than Odegaard as well. So there were things I thought Arteta could have done slightly differently in this game that may have got a better outcome. But obviously, Arsenal at this point are being more dominant. We are on the ball a lot more. We are creating these chances. We're just not being efficient enough when they're coming along to take them. And I think, obviously, the biggest theme of this game was the absence of Partey. Like, we really missed Partey. And we'll come on to that again in a second. But we have to talk about Martin Odegaard because it was a really poor performance from him. You know, in the last few weeks, we saw a few signs that things have began to improve. He was good away in Madrid, particularly in the second half, of course. I don't agree with, like, I think I saw a little clip going around of judges saying that he was hiding. I don't think Odegaard hid at all in this game. Odegaard still showed for the ball. He asked for the ball. He got the ball in deeper positions. He came deeper to get the ball. He just hasn't had any impact. He just didn't have any impact whatsoever. The passes that we usually see from him in previous seasons have gone. The directness of his play, the creativity, the ball striking from outside the box, he's not been good enough. Across the whole season, we know that. And I have, you know, we can all discuss the reasons as to why Odegaard hasn't been good enough across the whole campaign. We all know that it's from that injury. And since that point, he's not been the same player that he was. But like the little combinations, the triangles, the small 5-yard and sub 5-yard passes that he would usually do, the pass and move, the little combinations with Saka. And yes, he's not had the same combinations and players around him that he's had in previous seasons because of injuries to Saka and White throughout the campaign. But it's been underwhelming. And the problem with that, of course, is that we haven't got a backup. Fabio Vieira went on loan in the summer and we never brought in another attacking midfielder during that window, and that left us short. And in the summer, you know, no one should be sitting and saying Odegaard needs to be sold. It's not about that. That's not what this conversation is about. But what this conversation is certainly leaning towards is that we need to go and find, as I have been saying, and you guys know we've been talking about transfers for a long time now and what we would like to see in the summer, we have to go and sign another attacking midfielder. Like, we need to have those options. We need to have the difference. We have Winery, of course, but the kid's 17 years of age. And if we're being very brutally honest about Winery as well, he's not exactly been too impactful in the last couple of months when he's been given those opportunities. Even when he started, he's not necessarily been too impactful. Yes, he scored at Ipswich with that deflected strike, but I don't think we can expect so much of Winery. He's talented. He's going to have a future at Arsenal. He's a great young player. But at the end of the day, that is where we are with Odegaard, is that across the season, despite this little period of encouragement in the last couple of weeks from Real Madrid and into the Palace game, of course, and of course the Ipswich match, there's been encouragement there, particularly the Ipswich game and the Real Madrid game away from home. But outside of those two games, it's been a bad season. He knows that. He said it himself. People that would take the captaincy away from him or that would sell him, obviously, are just beyond repair when it comes to having kind of any normal conversation with them. But we need to go into the market and make sure that we've got competition, because at no point should he be on the field for as long as he was. At no point should he be on the field for as long as he was. Not only because his form is down, but because he's not fit. He's not been fit all season. It's so obvious to see. It's so clear and obvious to comprehend that he's not been there. But that comes down to squad building, and that needs to be addressed. Daniel says, if Bayern came in with a 70 million bid, would you take it? It's not about selling it. This needs to be, like, this idea of selling Odegaard is so stupid. Like, I'll be very blunt about it. It's stupid. Arsenal and the clubs of this size, you're not looking to get rid of your best players. He's in a bad campaign, affected by things beyond his control, and he's not in form, and he's not been good enough through things through his own control. But if Arsenal want to be a dominant force, if you want to be when you've got Kevin De Bruyne and you still go out and sign Bernardo Silva, you still go out and develop Phil Foden, you need attacking options. It's not about one in, one out. You need to get this out your brains about selling a player just to bring one in. You need to add quality to your team. You need to add it so that when a player like Odegaard, who's been crucial to the last two seasons, when he's not on it, you've got someone coming in. It's so reactive it's so stereotypical of our fan base that our immediate reaction for so many is to think about selling him. It's as simple as that. Kwame says, "Hey man, Odegaard isn't good enough," and Tom don't like hearing. Shut up, mate, because that's not what it is. It's not about saying a player's not good enough, or I'm not saying. I'm sitting here saying this season he's not been good enough. It's not about that. Odegaard has not been good enough, and we need to have reinforcement. It's as simple as that. That's what Arsenal need in that position. I really felt for Declan Rice yesterday. It was so obvious how much he was putting in effort-wise to this team. Yes, he is at fault for the first goal. It's all about Declan Rice being the 8 now, isn't it? I think he's a brilliant 6. I think he's a really good defensive midfielder. But it is amazing the influence that we miss when he's not in that role. And obviously, this is the conversation where we talk about Partey. Now, we can talk about Partey being this important player for the team, but you cannot have that conversation without talking about the reason why he's not with us for this game. And that's his own fault. And that's what frustrates me most about that, is not the fact that we missed him, not the fact that we had to change the midfield setup and obviously moving Merino into. I really don't get why Merino got much stick, to be honest, because I've actually thought Merino had a good game in midfield. He turned away from danger loads. He played in his teammates really well. We're having conversations in the press room actually about how impressive Merino was still being in midfield. But we lacked Rice's kind of style of drive and influence in the final third. Merino's a different type of midfielder to Rice. And you're not going to get that same type of drive from that position as you are from Rice. Merino is more of a passer. Rice is more of a progressor, both on the ball and with the ball as well. But Partey's absence in this game is entirely his fault for the stupidity that he did by falling into the trap at Real Madrid and pushing the player over. I think it was Brahim Diaz. And we missed him as a result. And that falls on him. We can all talk about the quality that we've missed, but it falls on him for being an idiot, for getting that yellow card that he didn't need to get. He will be welcomed back for the second leg. And if Arsenal have a chance of going through, it will be because Partey is going to be back into this team. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to a player like Rice and the influence that we feel from him in the 8 role, that was missed yesterday. And you can see why Arsenal are going to go into the market and are looking to strengthen at DM. You can see why, even if Partey stays, they still want to sign Zubimendi, because Arteta clearly loves Rice in the 8 position. Clearly really enjoys having him further up the field and having his influence on the team further up the field again. I really felt for Rice yesterday, because I thought he was really good again. You know, considering the position that he was playing, only outside of the mistake he made in the opening 5 minutes, I thought he had a really good game and obviously made up as much as he could for Partey being missing. And by the way, saying that we missed Partey is not a criticism of what Rice did. It's actually more that we didn't get to see the absolute best of Rice because we didn't have the player that he usually plays with. There were times I saw where Rice was kind of on the ball and looking around. He was kind of looking for who to pass to, and his usual teammates weren't there. That for me is where obviously we need to hope that when Partey returns in the second leg and we have Rice play in the normal position, that things change. The other question then is, what do you do with Odegaard? It's like, what do you do then? Because if it was any other team, of course you would drop them. You would drop Odegaard as he should have been dropped ages ago. But we haven't got anybody. You could ask about Waneri, but again, he's not been particularly impressive in the last couple of months when he has got some of those opportunities, and he's 17, so it's not exactly surprising. I don't know how that's going to change in the second leg. Ian says plays in it. Did you watch the last games and he played at 10, Ian? Did you watch it? Wasn't good. Was not good. So That is not the answer by any stretch. It's just short memories. People have short memories when it comes to the team, when it comes to performances, and when it comes to trying to work out what to do. It's like, the best player is the player that's not currently playing. Well, if you watched Zinchenko in the last game, I know that's not PSV. When he played that role, it was not good. And it didn't have any influence on the game at all. He was good against PSV in that role, but not in his last game. Nah, not good. So let's talk about Arteta just to round off part one before we go to part two and some of your questions. What did Arteta do wrong? Well, he left the subs way too late. It took 15 to 20 minutes to sort out the problem that he recognised at the beginning of the game, and that should have obviously have been something that was never a problem from the start. You've got 6 days to prepare for this game, of course, compared to PSG's 4. We shouldn't be making a mistake in the first 5 minutes that leads us to have to change things dramatically at all. If the plan was to play with Merino kind of as a dovetailing centre forward and leave that space in behind, that is underestimating what PSG in the chat box. Like that's what ultimately we're going to find ourselves getting frustrated by is the mismanagement of PSG in a way, and underestimating how indeed they were going to approach the match. At the same time, this is where you go back to January. This is where the conversation returns to January, because January was a failure, a colossal mismanagement of a transfer window. And yes, we can talk about not having a sporting director in charge, but Arteta cried out for days and weeks to bring in reinforcement in that window. PSG brought on more than £100 million worth of attacking talent in Barcola and Ramos that they'd spent in recent years. And we had Raheem Sterling on the bench who didn't come on. We had Winery come off the bench with a few minutes to play. Saka was shattered. Rice was shattered. Timber was shattered, and that's why he had to come off for Ben White. There were so many players blowing by the end of this game. Like that game against Bournemouth, we need to rotate heavily for that game. We need to give these players a rest ahead of that second leg. Partey needs to play because Partey doesn't tend to do too great when he misses a game and comes back. And we saw that actually against Palace. He didn't have a very good game against Palace, and he missed the game against Ipswich. So Partey does need to play. He needs to get minutes into his legs. And I hope that he does play against... I hope that he does play the next game, because as I say, he needs that. Partey needs to be warmed up before he plays a game, because if he comes in a bit cold, it doesn't go too well typically. So... but beyond that, it was, as I agree with what Arteta said post-match, it was a game of fine margins. It was a game where if Arsenal had taken the chances they obviously had, it could be a very different scoreline. Equally, if PSG had taken the chances they had at the end, the game could be over. So it was a fine margin game. It was a game that leaves Arsenal still very much in the tie. We've seen teams obviously turn around these scorelines in Champions League knockout rounds, even when they've lost the home leg, And I wouldn't put it past Arsenal, going to PSG and with Partey back in the team, and hopefully with some rest and some motivation, they can go and do that. They're going to be very motivated to do that, of course, as well. And I do think that I wouldn't have changed anything about the lineup. I wouldn't have changed anything about, necessarily how we wanted to try and win it. I wouldn't have changed. I think people are making a lot of the videos that are going out. I think you're overthinking it if you're looking at kind of the videos or the hype and the stuff like that. I don't think it's these are footballers at the elite level. No video being posted is going to change the nerves or the anxiousness of a night in a Champions League semi-final. That for me is, in my opinion at least, the area where there's a little bit of over-analysis going on. For me. Just kind of where I'm at on that front. But we're going to go to part 2 now, and we're going to tackle some of your thoughts and some of your comments in the chat box and get some of your feelings about yesterday's game right after this. Right, this is part 2 of today's show. We'll be tackling some of your thoughts, some of your feelings in the comment section and the chat box. So if you would indeed like to get a question thrown in, if you use a capital Q, now is the time to throw it into the chat. Sandro says, Tom, remember when I told you that I am not confident and have no hopes for this tie, and you made fun of me? Did I? Yesterday was the perfect example. My gut feeling was right. What's your opinion? I don't know. The make fun of you bit. Disagreeing with you isn't making fun of you. Let's try and get a little bit of a thicker skin. But when it comes to the idea that not being confident, I don't think there was any reason not to have confidence go into this game. And we saw yesterday, of course, that Arsenal still could have very much won this game. You know, they had the chances to score. They had the opportunities. They were a fraction from scoring at the start of the second half. They had created 2 major opportunities that should have been taken. You know, it's not that we didn't have that confidence. We've just gone to Real Madrid. We've just beaten Real Madrid 5-1 with a 9-3 aggregate victory in the round before that. There was reasons for confidence. So, yeah, I will stress that point again. If someone disagrees with you, that's not taking the mick. Tayo says, Odegaard is a very technical player and a great team asset, but he is not very convincing or awe-inspiring. You never quite feel that he can inspire a comeback. It always seems nearly. Odegaard is an engine, man. Like, Odegaard is a puzzle piece. Odegaard is not a match winner. He's not a... He's a bit of a luxury kind of player in the sense that he should improve a really good team when he is performing well. But you're right, he's not the type of player that if the team is bad, he can turn around a performance. He is the type of player that if he is really good, the rest of the team tends to be really good. And we've seen that in the last 2 seasons. You look at any of our best performances over the last, not this season, the last 2 seasons where he won player of the season. Any game he was really good, we were very comfortable. And we've been a little bit reliant on that. But this season, when he's not been great and we've needed him to step up and he's not, that's the star factor. And that's why I am on the Eberechi Eze train and why I've been saying for many months now that I'd love us to go and sign an Eberechi Eze, you know, and to bring in competition. Again, I maintain those saying that Odegaard needs to be sold. I have absolutely no time for that opinion. I think it's ridiculous. But Arsenal absolutely need to go into the market and find competition so that when Odegaard isn't on it, you know. Good says, morning, Tom. Odegaard cost us the league. He is supposed to be the driving force of our attack. We scored more than 20 goals less this season. Isn't that amazing? 11 men on the pitch each game. Ridiculous numbers of injuries and silly decisions this season. But Odegaard has cost Arsenal the league. Again, I struggle with these opinions. I really do, because they don't make any sense. But it's nuts. Axel says, stop this talk, stripping Odegaard of the captain, get behind him. And this is the thing, you know, this idea that fans will expect Arsenal's players to win them titles, win them Champions Leagues, but the slight 1 season off after you did the guy that we're talking about here, won Arsenal's player of the season, the last 2 seasons, 1 season where he's had an injury, and as a team, we have really suffered and he's not been able to rest because we've had to have him playing because we've missed so many others. And fans, in inverted quotation marks, are like, get rid. See you later, son. Don't want you anywhere near this team. That's not fandom. That's fickleness. Iron says, wow, what a downer it was. And I do not want to hear people hear that we are favourites, as most people predicted a win, but a second leg is there. Arteta needs to overcome the deficit, which has not been his strong suit. I saw an amazing stat that Arsenal have only scored twice in all of the 9 semi-finals we've been in or something, which happened to be the first 2 that we got to the FA Cup final. But the League Cup against Liverpool, the League Cup against Newcastle, the Europa League against Villarreal, we just don't really score under Arteta in these semi-finals, and that is a worrying stat. Like that's without doubt, that's a worrying statistic. Sandro says, when I have some doubts and I want to speak about them, there is always backlash, and I get told that my way of thinking is bad. If I disagree with your point, Sandro, I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to dress it up. If I don't agree with what you said, I'm going to tell you. And you know, Like, as long as you're putting it across in a respectful way, it's fine. But I don't really get backlash. If someone just disagrees with your point and explains why you're wrong in their opinion, you've got to deal with that. Jeffrey says, Tom, please be honest. How do you rate the atmosphere yesterday compared to Real Madrid? I mean, in the first, like, the build up to it, it was louder. Like, there's no doubt that the noise was brought at the beginning of the game. But as soon as we conceded, it was like the air had been just sucked out of the Emirates entirely. Like, all of the hype and the build up, of course, when you concede that early in such a moment. And then obviously we didn't really respond immediately. It took a little bit of time before we really got going, as has been the case in a number of games this season. It's annoying, of course, but I get it. You know, you need the team sometimes to lift you. And there was a lack of intensity immediately after we conceded that didn't lean itself into the way in which, you know, we need to lift that crowd. You know, I'm not going to be critical of the crowd because I think they were let down with the Tifo stuff. I think we were made to look a little bit silly, unfortunately, with how it was executed. I think the decision not to have the full stadium kind of placards, the red and white, was also a bit of a mistake. You could argue that the minute silence that we had for the passing of the late Pope also affected a little bit of the noise, and there was concerns about that. You know, think about the Real Madrid game; they did a minute silence for some of the club icons that had passed recently, and that did interrupt the momentum of the noise as well. There was also some confusion about when the referee's whistle went, and fans started to chant as well because they thought that was the end of the minute as well, but it was the start. So that created a little bit of a confusion and a little bit of frustration. And that's Arsenal. If Arsenal lose this tie overall, it'll be because of what happened in the first 5 minutes of this game. If Arsenal don't reach the final, it will be because of the first 5 minutes, and I'm convinced by that. Because you have to set the tone sometimes for these Champions League ties, and we just set the tone in the worst possible way. So Nick says Tifo or not, there was no. Were you there, Nick? Because as someone who was there, the crowd brought it. Like, they really brought it at the beginning of the game. And when you concede so early on, I can empathize with that gut punch feeling, that frustration. Yes, I'm frustrated that the atmosphere wasn't good enough throughout. I am, obviously, but I do have empathy. And sometimes you do need the players to lift you as well. The fans brought it at the beginning, but the players didn't respond to that in the first 5 minutes the way that we wanted, you know, and that's it. But that's for me. That's where I'm at with that. Let's go to let's scroll up in the chat box a little bit more. Waza says, if anything was even more telling that we need a left side fix, Trossard was pretty poor. Martinelli was Martinelli. I mean, I look at kind of Martinelli in these moments, and he had better form, right? I remember a show that we did a couple of days ago, and someone left a comment like, Nico Williams isn't really any better than Martinelli. And obviously, we went and looked at the numbers, and that turned out to be very wrong. Martinelli is one of the few players at the club that was not signed by Mikel Arteta, and one of the few players that he inherited and has kept, along with Saka and Saliba, of course, as well. And that's why I get the sense that he's always been that player for me, where I feel as though that if there was to be a surprise replacement, a replies signing, it could be Martinelli, the one that was to be replaced. So that comes from moments like we saw yesterday, where in the biggest moments when the pressure is at its absolute highest, it doesn't quite happen. I forgot about some super chats. Thank you for reminding me, LJ. LJ says, respectively, Tom, what's stupid in insisting Odegaard is beyond being benched and replaced? He isn't exempt from the ruthlessness. I mean, the problem with comments like this, of course, is that I have literally said the words, we need to have gone into the market and sign somebody. And that's where the frustrations arise. So it's all well and good dropping me a donation, which is great, thank you. There's a difference between leaving a super chat and then making sure I read a comment out because you think you've got a point to make. I get that. But when you're going to do that, at least listen to what I've said before, or I've said I think we need to sign somebody so that we can bench and in some games replace Odegaard. It just doesn't land very well, LJ. Jashar says, "Morning, Tom. I want to thank you for the advice you gave to me and the community regarding leaving work and working in something you enjoy. I've finally done this, and it has made such a difference." Jashar, that's fantastic. If you can share with us, and you don't have to, it's a very personal thing, who's been a member with us now for 51 months, amazingly, please do share it. It's a message I send out. If you are able, and only if you are able, I never want to assume anybody's just in a position where they can't just quit your job, go do something else, because not everyone can do that. And, you got to respect that point. But I always maintain, if you're not happy what you're doing, work hard to be able to try and find a pathway away from that, if it is indeed possible. It might mean doing stuff on the side to build up a portfolio for something. It might mean volunteering in some area if you've got the extra time. Or it might be, if you are fortunate to have people around you that you can lean on a little bit for a period of time, to do that. It's amazing what things can be achieved by, taking a couple of risks, only if you can afford to do so. Gooner Legend says, "You need to chant, though, through the hard times. It's a shame the tickets keep going to corporations and real fans again." This is bollocks as well. Like, there are 40,000 plus season ticket holders in that stadium, mate. There are 40,000 plus season ticket holders. There are then several thousand away fans. And then, of course, you've got the ballot contingent as well, which probably makes up, I don't know the exact figures, but the percentage of the ground that takes up by the ballot, and then the percentage of the people that are in that ballot that are actually tourists. And I mean genuinely people that are just there for the game, not fans, is so small. So this idea that you can blame the ballot or the fans that have got tickets or the fans that didn't, or the contingent, the very small contingent of genuine tourists. I'm not talking about overseas fans like the xenophobes amongst our fan base that do. I'm talking about the genuine tourists that are just there for the game, happened to get a ticket and tried there. Because trust me, I know plenty of people that were from overseas that went to that game yesterday, and they would have shouted a lot louder than some of the season tickets I know that were there as well, just because that's how they are. So this idea that that was in any way to do with the ballot is a joke. So, peddle this absolute crap elsewhere, because that's what it is. Absolute rubbish. Let's go to Axel. Martinelli didn't have the best game, but yet, again, he works his socks off. And the one chance he had, he placed the shot well. Amazing stuff. I disagree slightly on the shot. I think he doesn't place the shot as well as he should. He has to go further towards the far post or go for a near post. I think he makes it too easy for Donnarumma to save it. TV1 says, "Sell Odegaard, no, but perhaps taking armband off him might free him up, and Rice or Gabriel are ready-made replacements as captain." It's just so silly, though. I don't agree with this idea of the captaincy in 2025 is just not a really big thing. It's just not. Captaincy is not like it was 20, 30 years ago. It's just not the same. The captaincy is not the same as it was. But the problem is, the way that you make it actually a big thing is by taking it off of someone. That's when you make captaincy a big thing. Is when you take captaincy off someone that you're not selling, that's going to be still in the team, that's in being part of the squad. That's when you make it a big thing. That's when you make it worse. There are leaders within this group. Odegaard is not the only person that can talk just because he's got the armband. He's not the only person that can lead just because he's got the armband. But if you take the captaincy off him, you are creating a problem that doesn't need to be created. People can step up, people can lead, people can talk without that player having to have something around their arm. Rice does it. Saliba does it. Timber does it. Lewis Skelly does it. Saka does it. It is nothing to do with the armband. People need to get this thing out of their mind that the armband is in some way, somehow influential to Odegaard's form. It's not. He was captain the 2 seasons. You voted him, and I say you because it's the majority of fans that voted him your player of the season. So clearly that's rubbish. So this idea that taking the armband off him is the right choice is so backwards because it creates the actual problem. It creates the issue. So that for me is always going to be so silly as a suggestion because you are creating problems. You are creating division. You are creating fractures within a united group that have punched above their weight in the last 3 seasons. The fact that Arsenal still sit second this year, the fact that Arsenal are beating Real Madrid 5-1 and are in the Champions League semi-final, having lost what we've lost, having been let down by the club in the January transfer window, like the fact that we are where we are is nuts. And yet people within our own fan base want to try and fracture this group even more by taking armbands off people and giving it to somebody else. Bench Odegaard, for sure. There's no debate there that if we had the player available to come in for Odegaard, he would be dropped by now. And if we'd have been able to be more proactive in the market in adding and finding somebody that could have helped us, then probably. Even if we'd have been able to bring back Fabio Vieira, just to see what he would have done. And I'm not saying he's the answer, but we don't really have anybody else. Waneri, as I've pointed out a number of times already in the show, there's talent there, but this kid's 17 and he's not been producing exactly loads. So in recent months, at least. So it's mad to me, like that view. It's absolutely mad that you'd take this group that is incredibly unified and is fighting and punching above their weight and is playing well beyond the sum of their parts because they are missing so many of their key parts, and you'd want to fracture that by taking apart one of the most key figures in the team's armband and giving it to somebody else who, by the way, I see some people suggesting Gabriel should get it, who's not even fit. So that for me is absolutely nuts. Grantley Poo says, FFS, what happened to being a supporter? Odegaard is having a dip this year and needs depth on the bench to support him. Get behind the club, its players, support the team, and don't slag them off. It's really quite that simple. And I don't know why so many people just, their immediate reaction is to go, sell him. Not good enough, sell him. I think it's ultimately mainly the people that have never felt he's good enough and actually have just been a bit gutted that he proved them wrong in those last 2 seasons. You know, that was probably really embarrassing for people. You know, I remember when Odegaard first arrived and he was being absolutely battered as a player. And then obviously in the last 2 seasons, he made those people look very silly. And I think probably on the majority, it's those same people that now feel in some way vindicated because he's had an off season, even though he's been great in the last 2 seasons. Maybe it's something to do with that. People's pride often goes above their support, particularly online and in chat boxes. But I think it's something to do with that. Lee says, Joe Root gave up the England captaincy because his form slumped. He became the greatest cricketer of all time. Hey, look, there's a bit of a different thing, Lee, between a player deciding. If Odegaard turned around and said he wanted to give the captain to someone else, I'm in no way here to turn around and say he's wrong to do that, because that's different. That's not the same, Lee, as taking it off of someone. If voluntarily Odegaard wanting to hand the captaincy so he could focus more on himself, then I have no issue with that. That's a completely different scenario. If you take it off him, you are creating a problem. I've got no issue with him giving the captaincy to someone else. No issue at all. If he wanted to do that, fine. And some people are pointing out that, you know, cricket's a different sport. But no, and Mike says, would you agree it's an issue? No, I don't think it's an issue. I just think he's not fit. I don't think he's had a good season. And I don't think he's got anybody to come in for him to enable him to have that time out of the spotlight. It's absolutely nothing to do with the armband being on him. It's nothing to do with that at all. And it's so weird that people are putting so much emphasis on it like it's 1998, because it's not. That's not how football is anymore. So it's just a strange one. It's a really strange one to me, how much emphasis is put on that. He needs to be taken out of the spotlight, and he just hasn't been able to do that. Kojo says, stop blaming Partey. I mean, there is an element of blame to go at Partey with this. You know, to not be sensible and say that Partey's yellow card at Real Madrid has cost us. There is absolutely there's nothing wrong with saying that Partey's silliness at Madrid has had some part to play in this game. It has. Partey has been, and as we've talked about before, Partey is in my Premier League team of the season. He has been the best defensive midfielder in the league, perhaps Europe this season. But that doesn't forego criticism when criticism has to be had. The same reason we're doing this with Odegaard now. When players are worthy of criticism, we'll criticize. So it's not a case of no, stop being critical. At the same point, we are backing Partey to come back in this second leg and to make right the wrong of the suspension from that last game. He has to make up from that error with a brilliant performance in Paris. That's what we hope. That's what we expect because we know how good he is. So I know there's a cult following aura around Partey. I get that. It happens. Some people just absolutely categorically will never say a bad word about certain individuals. We don't do that. Everyone has favourites. Odegaard's been one of my favourite players for a long time. Needs to be dropped if we had the player to do that. Arteta, I've been a huge backer of, as people know, but he got things wrong in this game. He left the subs way too late. He got the preparation wrong, clearly, with how we set up in the first 15 to 20 minutes. You need to stop. You need to start being a supporter of Arsenal and less so a supporter of individual players or less so a critic of individual players. Like, it's about the collective. It's not about this cult following of individuals. It's really odd behavior. TV1 says, at best, we're going to be 10 points worse off in the league. At best, how significant is that regression? Not very. I mean, look at the squad. Look at the team. Look at what we've lost. 10 points worse off, best case scenario. So if you look at the team from last season and the points that they amassed, and you look at how they amassed those points that they got last season, the records that they broke with wins and the records that they broke with goals, if we're 10 points worse off, which is what? 3 wins being losses and a draw from a win. That's how you get 10 points. And as a result of that, it's come from Saka being out for 4 months, White being out for the majority of the season, Havertz being out for half the season, Jesus being out for half of the season, Gabriel being out for the last 2 to 3 months of the season, us having some of the worst decisions we've ever seen in the Premier League, Calafiori being one of our summer signings and out for the majority of the season with 3 separate injuries, Merino missing the start of the season with obviously that broken shoulder or broken collar, whatever it was. I'm sure there's others that are missing as well. Winery was missing for a month in January of a hamstring injury. And there's probably others that I've completely forgotten about. Was Martinelli missing? I feel like Martinelli was missing as well, wasn't he? Martinelli was out for a bit as well. And so when it comes to like this idea that at best we might be 10 points off, shock horror. shock horror that we might be 10 points worse off compared to last season when you take that into account. That is not a surprise at all. Tomiyasu, yeah. I kind of sometimes don't really talk about Tomiyasu because I just assume he's always injured. But sure. I think that the fact that people would sit there and say that Arsenal could be best case scenario 10 points worse off or slightly more, but yet have reached a Champions League final for the first time since 2009, having knocked out Real Madrid along the way, battered teams like Man City 5-1 in the league, of course, as well. You know, I know there's a desperation for the trophies. I get it. I know there's a really desperate. I know some people are really bothered by how other fans talk to them, or when you go into work, or you go into school, and you're Liverpool supporting mate, or you're Chelsea supporting mate, or United, whatever, and they give you stick because Arsenal have not yet won a trophy in however long. But if you really would swap places with some of those teams, like United because they picked up a trophy, like Chelsea because they might grab a UEFA Conference League, I don't quite get it. And so this team have been, as I've said a number of times on the show already, they've been punching up this season. They have been punching up and above their weight beyond what some of their parts has been this season. And mistakes have come, and we've still made errors, and we've still made problems for ourselves. There have been things within our control that have gone wrong. The club have to be held account for January, without a doubt. And the summer as well. The summer wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough, and January was horrendous. So when it comes to the end of this season, and we look back and we look ahead, more importantly, to next season, this summer is, again, and I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, but this summer is the most important summer in Arsenal's history. We absolutely need to go into this window in the summer and add everything that Arteta has dreamed of, basically. We need to be spending huge money. We need to be adding quality players, and we need to be adding depth. We need to be adding competition to Odegaard, competition to the wide areas, competition to defensive midfield and the number 8 role. We need to be adding competition in defence still. We need to be covering off the chance of these injuries being as damaging as they have been. And I know the injuries have kind of piled up in specific areas which have exacerbated those issues, but there's a huge job that Andrea Berta has got. And Arsenal have already taken a very good step, in my view, by appointing Andrea Berta. That's a really positive sign. It's a very un-Arsenal type thing to do, you know. Giving our youth to Man United, says Jason, who's joking. I'm glad you're joking, Jason. TV1 says, you are right about we shouldn't have cult followings of individuals, and that should also include, without a doubt, you know, and that's why, as we've talked about on this show with the manager's got stuff wrong. That's why we set up wrong for this game. It's why we've been very critical of the mistakes that Arteta has made when they've been made. But that doesn't mean that you're right that he should either go or be replaced, because that in itself is a nuts view. It's an absolutely nuts view. Imagine having the team and the squad that we've had this season, yet Arsenal still reached the semi-final of the Champions League. That's nuts. So yeah, there you go. Lonesome Gunner says, you can speak of injuries, and I will. But there were changes within this available squad that the manager could have done but has failed. Such as what? What would have those changes really have been? Because I looked at the bench yesterday and we had Winery as our only viable attacking change. He's the only viable one. You know, Raheem Sterling is not a viable option. The only change I really would have liked to have seen differently is for Tierney to have come on at left back, for Merino to go at centre forward, for Trossard to drop in for Odegaard's role, and for Rice to push slightly further. That's the change that I would have made. That's what I would have done. Maya says, I beg to defer. I think you mean differ. I beg to differ. Would you be okay we kept finishing second for the next 20 years and reached the semi-finals of the Champions League? We understand we had lots of injuries. Well, no, because that's not progressing, is it? Every single season at Arsenal, we have gone that way. In the broad context of every single season at Arsenal, we've gone that way. Either domestically or continentally, we have gone that way. Every single season. The idea of finishing second for the next 20 years and reaching the semi-finals of the Champions League for the next 20 years, that's not going that way, is it? That's staying very much here. Arsenal got into the Champions League again in a season where we thought we'd be in a top 4 fight. They challenged for the league. The season after that, they reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League for the first time in 14 years and finished second and 2 points behind the league winners. And in this season, with all of the drama that I don't need to repeat myself with again, we took another step forward already. And it's not over yet, by the way. We took another step forward. I've now reached the Champions League for the first time in 16, 17 years. Every single season we've done something to take us a step forward. Every single season. So there's no beg to differ about this. That's just the fact. Every season under Arteta, we have gone that way. Every single season we've gone that way. We may end up finishing 3rd or 4th this season in the league, which will suck because I don't particularly like the idea of that position dropping. We're 2nd at the moment. But we've gone that way overall this season. It's not been a good season yet because of everything that's happened to us. But in the context of this season, we've still gone that way. AJ says, Tom, you can say that we've gone up and gone that way, but ultimately the need for trophies is what's staring us in the face. Oh, yeah, and again, that's a different thing. That's a different conversation. If Arsenal were not heading towards that, then that's a conversation we can have, AJ. But there's no way on earth that anyone can put an argument forth to me that Arsenal are not heading towards that. They've reached 2 semi-finals minimum this season, despite all of our issues that we've had. And yet we're not out of the Champions League. We're 1 goal down in this tie. And it's an uphill battle, of course. And it's going to be a real challenge. But I'd find it really odd. You know, there's a desperation for trophies, rightly. We need to be winning trophies. And that's why this summer's going to be huge. But the squad that's been available to Arteta this season has not been a team that is good enough, in my opinion, for a Champions League semi-final or to challenge this Liverpool team with the availability that they've had and the squad that Arne Slot inherited, of course. So, and yet they have reached the semi-final of the Champions League, and yet they have got to 2 semi-finals this season. AJ says, so Tom, I just think fans are so frustrated right now because these golden opportunities don't always come our way. But clearly they do, though. This idea that this is like once in a blue moon, I find really odd. And that we don't capitalize on things because they keep coming. They keep coming. So it's not like once in a, you know, these golden gems, these little moments that, you know, we're missing out on. They keep coming, don't they? They've been coming. They keep arriving. And we're not yet taking them. Yet, of course. We've still got a chance to win something this season. But this idea that they're just like these little moments here and there and we're not taking, that's not accurate, is it? Title races, cup runs, they are part of Arteta's tenure. And until that goes away and we regress, that's a different conversation. But we'll have this conversation again, of course, next week when we face Real Madrid. When we face PSG in Paris, and we'll be reacting to that. I'll be there in Paris for that game. And hopefully we can witness Arsenal produce one of the best turnarounds in Champions League history. Fingers crossed. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for those that have been respectful, as always. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and indeed respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal. Have a good day.